Welcome to this episode of Philanthropy United. I am your host, Jessica, and I'm here with my co-host, Kendall.
Hi.
And we are so thrilled to have my dear friend, Lorraine Tallman, the founder of Amanda Hope Rainbow Angels, in the studio with us. Thank you for making time for us today.
Hello, I'm excited to be here.
You're the best.
I play with children all day, so
Yes.
I'm always having fun.
I saw your post actually yesterday about how you guys have lost
It was a difficult week. 4 of our little warriors passed away this week, and then we had several children relapse, which is always hard to hear because, Amanda, who the charity's named after, my daughter relapsed, and it just breaks my heart because as Americans, we've only developed 3 drugs for children fighting cancer since 1950. We're still using that same drug we developed in 1950, and children relapse from that drug. So knowing the background behind the drug that we should not be using, but we are because it's
all we've got.
And then, seeing our little ones relapse. And I'm the one, that are very close to the family. So, I get those calls late at night from moms and, it just takes your breath away. Pediatric cancer, when you're fighting it, is a 2 to 5 year battle anyway because, their molecular structure, everything's growing, right? So cancer treatments...
that means cancer cells are growing too.
Cancer cells are growing. It's not like adults where,
it takes longer.
My mom, my dad, my niece have all fought cancer, and it's like you get 6 chemo treatments or 6 weeks or 6 months, depending on the diagnosis, and then you're done.
I feel like for a child it would be indefinite.
Yeah, it's years. It's a minimum 2.5 to 3 years of chemo. So I remember Amanda getting chemo for 28 days in a row once.
So let's back up for a second.
Yeah.
You started this charity because of Amanda.
Right.
How old was she when she got diagnosed, and what led her to getting diagnosed with cancer?
So she was 9 years of age when she was diagnosed with leukemia, and it was flu season. Kids were going back to school, so we thought she had the flu. So we actually went back to the pediatrician 3 different times. And, they were like, it's the flu, maybe it's a stomach virus, it's going around, the strep is going on, it was all this.
Everything else.
Everything that all moms hear when their kids go back to school. But she was getting migraines. And so I took her back to the pediatrician, and that mama bear came out, and I went, no, something's wrong. I don't. She's never been this sick for 3 weeks. What's going on? And he goes, well, maybe she's anemic. And I was like, okay. And they tested her finger, pricked her finger, and her hemoglobin was only 2.6. And in the hospital, we start giving blood transfusions when it's 8.0. So how she was even walking, surviving was a miracle. And the doctor didn't even believe it. He actually did it again. And then
did he do a different finger?
Yeah, 3 different fingers. And then, of course, by then you have a 9-year-old that's been poked 3 times. You can imagine what I was dealing with. And then they came back in and said they had to draw blood.
Oh.
So it took...
She was happy.
Took several of us to hold her down to get that blood out. And then about 3 hours later, her doctor called me and said, I'm really sorry, Mrs. Tallman, but your daughter has leukemia, which, I was speechless. And he's like, we have a room waiting for you at PCH. So head on down there immediately. And then as a mom, I have to go back into my daughter's room, who's been traumatized over what happened to her at the pediatric office, to tell her I have to take her to the hospital.
Where they're going to poke and prod some more.
Did you go that night?
Oh yeah, I loaded up her little blanket and some of her toys and flew down to the hospital. Called her father, and he was out of town, so we had to fly home quickly. And we started the process, and then we were, inpatient for like 3 weeks right at the beginning as they started, surgery with a port, and then chemo, and her blood levels shot down. And so we were getting blood transfusions constantly and platelet transfusions constantly. It was...
What stage was she at when they diagnosed her?
It was advanced.
So a 4? 3, 4?
It's a little different with pediatric cancer, but not like breast cancer, but It was it was a very aggressive, advanced form of leukemia, and so they call it a pre-B cell. And so,
but miraculously, she beats it.
she does. 3 years of chemotherapy, she beats it. We have the no more chemo party. Everything is, everybody's there.
It's the best day ever.
It was the best day ever. She was so happy. We had like a blow up bouncy toy that took the entire front yard.
Yes.
We got like the biggest one that was possibly available.
And did it have a water slide too?
Oh, everything.
Everything.
It was everything. And every kid in the neighborhood, all the kids loved her. She'd been through it 3 years. So, all the neighborhood kids who knew her and loved her, everybody was there. I finally got back to work, which the first 3 years was a financial disaster because I had to stop working. So that was only my husband. And for those of you who were familiar with when the housing market crashed in Arizona, that's when we were fighting cancer. So,
so this is like 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you also have more than one child.
I had 3 daughters.
So what were the other 2 doing while you were hospital bound?
Well, we were depending on neighbors to get our kids to school, to drive them to the hospital afterwards. My husband was, running around like a crazy person. He was in the banking industry, worked for B of A at the time. And then the market crashed and he got laid off. So now I'm not working. My husband didn't work for 8 months. We're trying to figure out how we're going to pay all these bills. We still all of our other bills, our home, our car.
Right, life doesn't stop because
life does not stop.
A cancer diagnosis came.
Yeah, your other children who, Rachel was a dancer, so she was on, in a dance company, but then you can't afford these things anymore. So there are...
So everybody's suffering.
Everyone, Leah was a singer and a pianist, and everything stopped. You have to. You cannot... One, you can't even figure out how to get them to those events, but 2, you can't afford it anymore. You're paying for chemo and everything else that...
Right, you're fighting for the one to stay alive versus you doing your extracurriculars.
Yeah. So you get through the woods, and then what happens?
So then I get back to work, and I was in sales. I was doing recycling for waste management sales, which I love sales, so that was a great job. And 3 months into it, it was bring your daughter to work day. And I brought Amanda with me to work, and she was there having a great time at work. And then about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she goes, "Mom, I have this terrible headache." And she laid on my desk, literally. I'm like, "Baby, what's wrong?" She goes, "I don't feel good." And of course, that's what happened 3 years prior. So I talk about post-stress disorder. I was like, ugh. I looked at my boss, I go, "I have to take her to the pediatric doctor right now." And he's like, well, I'm like, "She doesn't feel good, I need to go." And so I rushed her over there, and he looked her over, and he's like, "Lorraine, she's just sick, like normal sick." And I remember driving home going,
"No.
Normal sick? Like, I had not dealt with that in 3 years. Well, normal sick at all. We've dealt with life and death, not knowing she's going to make it through the night, but never like normal. And I bring her home, and I'm like, "All right, I guess I'll make chicken soup." Right? That's what you do, normal sick.
Normal sick, normal meal.
I don't know. And so I took her upstairs, I tucked her in, I went downstairs, and then all of a sudden she screamed, and the left side of her was paralyzed. She couldn't move her mouth and her, and